hairs on my body started standing on end.
Silent. Nothing there.
I fought to get back into my body.
You are going to be of vital importance of helping us convince the masses.
Type 471.
Type 471.
Bridge to the other world.
Bridge to the other world.
Welcome to Type 471. I'm Sam Kitchen. Now, my guest today is someone, if you've ever watched TV, you know who this guy is. My guest today is Bobo, with whom you are doubtless familiar from the wildly successful Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot, as well as a host of other Bigfoot-related programming, and his own podcast, Bigfoot and Beyond, with Cliff and Bobo. This guy's got his finger on the pulse of all things Sasquatch. I always love talking to him. You know, I've been looking into Bigfoot and researching Bigfoot for a very long time, but every time I talk to Bobo, he tells me something that just blows my mind, and I'm sure we're going to hear some of that today. So I always like talking to Bobo. Bobo, welcome to Type 471. How you doing, man?
Good, Sam, good. It's about time you had the honor of waiting.
Yeah, I've been waiting. I think we had a little miscommunication going there. Like, I was waiting for you, and you were waiting for me, but, you know, we met somewhere in the middle. That's good. Hey,
Yeah.
did you tell me recently that you were on another podcast recently?
God, I can't remember now. I know we do ours all like every week. I haven't done anything in a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because
I don't have anything. I mean, you've done me some favors, so I owed you. But what my position has been is that I'm holding off until I got something that I can talk about. And I got some projects in the plans that I'm going to talk about. I could just say this: they're historical Bigfoot accounts.
Yeah.
Going back pre. Actually, they're all pre like 1930.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I know you don't want to get too far into that, but I love this historical Bigfoot stuff. Like that's kind of like a meat and potatoes kind of thing. You learn a lot when you delve into those areas. And well, even though we can't really get into it, I look forward to seeing all that's coming up. But I'm glad to hear that you haven't been on any other podcast, because I was going to get jealous for a second, like you cheated on me or something.
No, nothing like that. I've been true blue, Sam, true blue.
Oh man, I appreciate that. You're a faithful guy. So, like, in terms of you owing me favors, like, what did we do? How did we first come together? Let's hear you talk about it.
Well, I got a call from Rowdy. He was working. Rowdy Kelly. He's part of the Bluff Creek Project, and he's one of the film commissioners for Humboldt, Del Norte counties, because they film a lot of stuff up here because of the redwoods and this and that. And they were filming some Bigfoot stuff, and he said, "Hey, I need a couple witnesses for this Bigfoot documentary they're doing with Robbie Knievel." And I'm like, "All right, huh?" Robbie's, he's I've known who he was since I never met him, but I was like, "Yeah, it'd be cool to just go hang out." And they said they'd, give me buy lunch and dinner and give me gas money to come up, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I got the day up. I'll come and see what's up with Robbie doing this." And then ended up hitting it off with him, and then stayed, was filming for the rest of that movie. Then we did another one that's still getting edited, and that's the one we did with you. So we were filming around Mount Shasta, and I was looking for witnesses in Shasta. I remember reading your report on the BFRO back in the day, and so I got a hold of you that way. And then they got to hang out a couple times since then, and had a good time.
Yeah, it was some good times. And speaking of Robbie Knievel, like, we were shooting at the producer's house, and it turns out that this producer, Warren, is the curator or owner of the Knievel estate or something like that. And we were shooting some scenes out there, and I mentioned, well, actually, what happened first was that I was wearing some stuff that had brand names on it, and he didn't like that because you didn't want to get billed for these brand names. So like I had to change my clothes. So I had to change into these things that were like all Knievel related. And then later in the evening, like it got cold, and I mentioned that I left my jacket back at the cabin, and so Bobo goes into the house. He's like, "Oh, I'm sure Warren has something for you," and he comes out, and Bobo's like bringing me this jacket that is like this original Evel Knievel jacket. So like the whole night I'm wearing this $30,000 original Evel Knievel jacket and all this Knievel gear. So like Bobo thought it was funny as hell to dress me from head to toe in all things Knievel.
Like, it was great. He had a shirt, Robbie Knievel shirt, Robbie Knievel hat, and an Knievel jacket. It was like, you look like, I was just laughing. I was like, wait, this guy's got a real fetish for the Knievels, and none of it was yours.
Yeah, I'm like the ultimate Knievel fetishist over here. According to you, that is. So you must have told your story, I'm sure, you're setting on here to your listeners already, huh? Well, actually, that's what I was just going to get into. Like, we first connected over my sighting, and I haven't really fully explained my sighting yet. So I was thinking, like, I'll explain it, and then you and I can talk about it, because it has some interesting and unique Sasquatch behaviors in it. You want to get into that?
Sure, yeah.
All right, cool. So I'll just kind of briefly go over it. Like, I was 17 years old, and I was in Redding, California, it was like in the middle of summer, just hot as hell. A friend of mine and I were hanging out in Redding at 2:00 in the morning. We were bored out of our minds, and we decided to go up to Whiskeytown Lake, which is to the west of Redding. And so we go up there because our friends would hang out at this popular beach up there called Brandy Creek Beach. And we wanted to see if any of our friends were there. We got up there. It turns out it's completely deserted, not a soul around. I pull into the parking lot and park anyway. And on the left side, so I pull right into the front, right, the spot closest to the beach. And on the left side is a stand of pine trees. On the right side is this restroom area / snack bar area. And there's a sandy pathway right in between the two. So I start walking down there. And my friend got immediately sketched out. Like, he didn't want to go any further. So he stayed pretty much close to the restroom area for some reason. I'm still not sure why. And so I continue down to the beach past this stand of pine trees. And as I clear the stand of pine trees, I see that there is an individual squatting at the water's edge, like doing something in the water, pretty much just sitting on his heels. And it was like this humanoid figure. And now, in my lifetime, I had already had, at the age of 17, I had already had a number of unique experiences. So I've always had, an open mind. I've always known that there is more to reality than what people would than the mainstream view of reality. So, I'm an open guy, but, Bigfoot was not really on my radar in those days. So as I see this humanoid figure, I could immediately tell there was something up. Like, it was, not just normal, but I was still telling myself that it was a human. So I see this figure, and then I go back to my friend who's still up near the restroom area, and I'm like, there's somebody down there. And, we're talking about it for a second. And then I go back, and I get so close to this individual that I'm like, 15 feet away from this individual max, as he's sitting at the water's edge. And I could see that he's twirling something around in the water, just kind of, like half-heartedly twirling something around. And this whole time that I'm coming near to this individual, I get the impression of great sadness. Like, I feel this individual's sadness just emanating from this thing. And it was acting kind of like a pouty child, like a child who had just gotten in trouble. And it's just kind of sitting there twirling something around in the water. And I actually feel that as I was approaching it, like, it was making this kind of, really sad, mewling, kind of moaning, pathetic sound. And So just immense sadness coming from this thing. So I get right up behind it and I say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so right then, at that moment, it straightens its back up, and I could just see the massive width of his shoulders and this enormous trapezius muscle. And as he straightens up, like the hair separates on his shoulders. And I could see the hair doing this against the moonlit water of the lake. And then he looks over his right shoulder at me, just kind of, just kind of glancing out of his peripheral vision. And I could see like the profile of his head and his face. Right then, the word boxy popped into my mind, like in terms of the shape of his head. It looked like he had a boxy, square head. And I could see a heavy brow ridge. I could see a nose that was like a human's, but it was smaller in proportion to the face than a regular human nose. It was closer to the face. And so, like, he just kind of looks at me over his shoulder for a second, and then he just goes right back to what he was doing, looking at the water, twirling this limp thing around in the water. So all of this is pretty much unique behavior in the broader context of general Sasquatch, Bigfoot sightings and encounters. I would like to hear from you, Bobo. Compare and contrast the two. Like this type of experience, compared to other experiences, and how it differs. I want to hear your ideas about the difference in behavior.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing playing with because the one you saw was big, like it was like a big adult, like, or maybe not full adult, but how big do you think it was? 7.5 foot?
It must have been. That's. I'm glad you asked me that. I was slightly uphill from this individual because we were on a sandbank that sloped a little bit downward into the water, and he was right at the water's edge. I was behind him like 10 or 15 feet, so I was a little bit uphill from him. And when he straightened his shoulders up, he was his head must have come up to like my mid-chest area. And I'm 6 feet tall. I was 6 feet tall at the age of 17 when this happened. So, if I'm standing uphill from him and he's squatting on his heels, and when he straightens up his back, the top of his head comes up to my mid-chest, that tells me that this is a very tall individual. I mean, I think he was full grown, but like at the same time, I feel that he was like in his late adolescence to early adulthood. I sensed immaturity in him, but physically he was a big boy, no doubt.
Right. Yeah. You guys are probably on about the same plane, like the equivalent of a 17-year-old boy going to manhood.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like we were kind of simpatico in that sense. We're like in the same kind of place in our lives. And that brings up a whole bunch of good points, because since you and I have been talking about this encounter, I've been thinking about it a lot more. And a lot of strange things have occurred to me. Like, he knew that we were coming. Like, he heard the car. He saw the headlights. He heard me park. He heard us come down. He had every opportunity to get away, but he didn't. He just stayed there. And then I went up and I talked to him, and he still stayed there. He didn't leave until after I went back to my friend and I said, "That's a fucking Bigfoot. Let's get out of here." And then we at that point, in fact, drove my car from that parking lot into another parking lot that was like at a 90-degree angle from this parking lot, where I could go to the front of that parking lot and shine my headlights on the beach where I had just been. So I did that, and at that point I didn't see anything, but my friend saw eye shine coming from inside the tree cover. So like at that point, after I left, he left, and he didn't attempt to leave at any point before that. I mean, what does all this say to you, Bobo?
Yeah, it's almost, because I've talked to people that said for one thing, as far as the twirling like a stick around the edge of the water, I've heard that, and it's always been from small ones. Like yours is the biggest one I've heard of doing it, but that would make sense though if it was, physically getting big, but still mentally, like a high school boy, could still be doing the same thing that the young ones do. But that's I've heard that observed behavior with them with sticks or whatever, like some chunk or whatever, but usually it's a stick, twirling it in water or like at a ant hole or something. Like they'll be messing around like with a stick, kind of just poking. And whenever people see them doing that, they seem like they're real languid. Like they're not, like they almost want like sympathy or like a hug from the human. You know what I mean? Like they seem like they're not fleeing. Like they kind of want to make a connection. It seems like.
Yeah, that's the impression that I'm getting. And you've a number of times now you've told me like what a missed opportunity this was for me to take off. And like I think that that's even more true than I had at first realized, because I think you're right. I think he did want some kind of interaction. Like how would interaction go at that point? Like what should I have done? What should somebody do in that situation, and how could it be constructive?
I've heard just talk real low and gentle, and just keep your hands, where they can, not like doing any threatening poses or act, holding something like it's a weapon, and just talk calm and cool. And yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, and who a lot of times that people that seem that they keep their cool and deal with them is women. Like they I guess they seem to act a lot mellower towards women and generally overall anyways. They're way less aggressive to women. But and also children, and you being 17, I'm sure you sense that youthfulness about you. It's impossible to say because almost no one hangs out and tries to make contact. They usually people just take off like you did. I mean, 99.9999% of people would have took off right then.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of missed opportunities. Not a lot, but I mean, there's missed opportunities like that. And I've also talked to people that said wounded ones have like seemed like they've come for help. Like they've come up injured and they're limping or holding a wound, or they got a big open gash or something. They'll come out like they want help for that. Right. I've talked to 2 people that have seen them approach ambulances.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I want to hear about that. I've never heard that before.
The one I can think off the top of my head was the ambulance driver was on DK Road. It's a famous road up in southwest Washington on the Olympic Peninsula down near Tolola on the coast. And he was driving down DK, and he had his lights and sirens on, and this Bigfoot came out, and I guess it was holding its arm like it would look like it was like had a broken shoulder or something like that. It was injured. It had blood on it too, and it kind of made a gesture towards the ambulance as it was going by around a turn. And he showed himself and like kind of was gesturing like it needed help. Like they were like, I mean, that if that was true, then that's how smart they are. Like they know that ambulances take people away that are, they've had to have seen that hundreds of times, and it was car wrecks or logging accidents, and here goes an ambulance, and then the injured person gets put in it and taken away. So if that was the case, the thing was showing itself to the ambulance because it was injured. That's pretty amazing. And that, Paul Graves actually spoke to the people involved in that one.
Whoa. You see, okay, some little thing like that, one little encounter like that can actually provide us all kinds of insight into their behavior, their mentality, etc. It gives us one little encounter like that can give us actually so much information, because that implies so much. It implies that, like you said, they're so intelligent, they know actually what an ambulance is and what it does and its purpose. And from there, we can then infer that they not only observe and are intelligent, but that they communicate. They must have a way of conveying this information to one another, because not every Sasquatch has seen an ambulance.
Right.
So that tells us the probability of language, and that also tells us that they pass down information generationally. So they must have some sort of sense of history. There's so much that one little thing like that can tell us, and so I kind of want that to be like a lesson for everybody who has, any kind of encounter. We can learn so much just from, any little thing that we experience with these individuals. So I just hope we always keep our minds open to that.
Yeah, because I mean, I've always said people way underestimate their intelligence. But I mean, if that was the case, it really was identifying, help associated with that ambulance, and then to show himself being injured, that is a whole nother level of intelligence.
Right.
Because I hear people say like that. That's what when people say like they might even know what guns are. I'm like, if you think they might know what guns are, you don't know jack shit about Sasquatches. They know what guns are 100%.
Absolutely. And there again, not every Sasquatch has seen a gun, but every Sasquatch, I'm willing to bet, would know to be wary of a gun. So that again says that they communicate these things to one another.
I don't know. There's any that haven't seen a gun. I would think they all have.
Why?
There's a lot of. I mean, everyone out in the bush is usually carrying guns. At some point. I mean, maybe if they're in the middle of a national park, they might not know. But I think they communicated enough with each other. I think they have a language. I think they have, a culture. I think they have, have abstract thought on some levels. And I think they communicate, and I think they all know what the bang stick is,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's just my personal belief. And I think either if the thing lives in the middle of Yosemite, it's not seeing hunters, But I think they'd still know about it from other ones.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, even if they haven't seen something like a gun, they still know what to be wary of because they talk to one another.
Yeah, well, even dogs, you point a rifle at a dog, like it puts its tail between its legs and goes away.
Sure. Yeah. Like my mom, like a few years ago, she had a dog that she got, like this dog had a previous family that it had been with. And apparently, like, this family, unfortunately, had abused this dog. So every time you take a coat hanger out of the closet, this dog would get really nervous and start shaking and maybe piddle or something. So this dog, knew what a coat hanger was and, recognized it and knew that it was something to be wary of. So, I mean, any animal that has any sort of survival instinct is going to know from experience what things can hurt it. And, but in the case of the Sasquatch, like, there is evidence of a communication there because like they're not all going to experience the same things, and yet they all know what to be wary of, or so it seems to me. I mean, I think the best evidence so far suggests that they are all informed of what to be wary of.
Right. Yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the things that they all are aware of, like I would be able to say personally that they all see our roads, they all see our weird looking lights down below, they all see, our structures, they see our trash, they know what we are, what we do, what things belong to us, and so they are all aware of us to a great extent, but that doesn't mean that all of them personally come into contact with all the things that are dangerous about us. And so the fact that they would know to be wary of a gun says to me that they tell each other about guns. But I mean, you're right. Like any animal, who has something pointed at them, they're going to know, oh, this is a threat. So, I mean, there is that as well. But I personally feel that they're definitely telling each other about guns. And as far as language goes, I mean, there's this bit of folk wisdom that goes way back, that they understand all native languages. Now, I personally interpret that to mean that, like a Sasquatch in a given area, there are those who believe that means that every Sasquatch understands all native languages. Now, I wouldn't necessarily think that to be the case. I would think that would mean that the Sasquatches in a given area would understand more or less this particular native language, and then a Sasquatch on the other end of the continent would understand a different native language, and so on. And English has been on this continent long enough that they would understand English. And it would certainly behoove them to understand our language. That would give them a strategic advantage, a tactical advantage, a survival advantage. So I think very much that they understand our language. They have their own language. They even incorporate our languages into their language, and they communicate with each other about these things.
Yeah. What's interesting was the tribes of the Pacific Northwest, they just have a relationship with these things like no other tribes around the country. I mean, they're so intricately intertwined with them. Maybe the Seminoles in Florida, they had a very tight relationship according to their verbal history. And they said the reason they were able to push so far into the Everglades and get so far down into Florida was they were able to, even though they were a smaller tribe than some of the tribes they were running into, like the Minnesiqui, and I hope I said that right, and some of the other tribes that were indigenous down there. The Seminoles came down from Georgia, and they said that they would fight during the day, and at night the Sasquatches that came with them would take over and they'd fight. They'd attack the other tribes at night, so they never got to sleep. So like while the Seminole warriors were resting, that the other Bigfoots would harass them all night and kill guards and just terrorize them. And that's how they were able to take over such a huge section of Florida so quickly. So that's pretty interesting. And then but on a more recent note, I mean, that was hundreds of years ago, but on a more recent note, I'm in contact with a Native woman up in Washington, Olympic Peninsula, and her tribe, for the main food sources, like there was a family that knew, like their job was to teach all their kids, they were the specialists on elk. There was another family that knew everything about salmon, like, they'd pay close attention to the water levels and what signs, like when the runs are coming, so they could know when to put the nets out, that sort of stuff. There's another family that would know all about wolves. They're trying to know about deer. And so their family was the Sasquatches. Her husband's family was the Sasquatch family. They were the ones that, that kept the knowledge of the Bigfoot. And I never got to meet him, but she was a wealth of information. What she told me was that when she was a girl, she was told, because she was the first generation really to speak English. And she said that when they first came in and yanked the kids out and sent them to boarding schools, there was the older generation, and a lot of them died from diseases, introduced diseases and such. So there was like a kind of fast generational change. And they would beat the kids, for speaking native tongues. So they forced them to speak English. So she said it took 2 generations of them learning English for the Sasquatches to kind of keep up, because what she said was that they communicated by a third, like hand gestures and miming stuff, a third telepathy, and then a third native words. And so, she said when they switched to English, it just threw them way off. And it took the Sasquatches, she said, like, 30, 40 years to pick up the English words.
Let me make sure I'm understanding everything you're talking about right now. When you say a third spoken language, a third telepathy, and a third, what was the third thing?
Native tongue.
Right. Okay. Now, when you say that, you are talking about, are you talking about the native people's interaction with the Sasquatch, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So that they use these 3 different methods to communicate with the Sasquatch.
No, it's all at once. It's all at once. Like they'll mime things and say, key words. So yeah, you can imagine they're kind of thought projecting and making the hand gestures, and they know a few words like Chinook, or Skookum, or they're referring to themselves as Skookum, or they're talking about Chinook, like the fish, and they might be, like gesturing how they want to trade fish for bear meat or whatever it is.
Right. Okay. Wow. That in itself right there is so interesting. First of all, I mean, even the natives from tribe to tribe, they have their own sign language that they would use to communicate across their own language barriers from tribe to tribe. So they're incorporating some of this as well into their communication with the Sasquatch, along with telepathy. Like, did she elaborate on that part at all? Like, did this come in mental images or what?
Well, I think you just hear it in your own language.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I've got. I mean, it could totally. I've gone. I don't want to sound like everyone knows my story, but I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have heard me say this 100 times. But I've had a couple of encounters where I had what was clearly not my voice in my head. Like, it wasn't an external voice, but I got a loud and clear message in the presence of a Sasquatch. And it could have been totally triggered by just extreme, like, adrenaline or a pheromone it's secreting, like the pheromone, or it could be infrasound, like this infrasound, can cause like audio hallucinations and that sort of thing. You're hearing things that aren't there. So it could have, hit me with an infrared sound, and that's what my brain turned it into, or just a big adrenaline rush in my brain, made that up itself. I mean, but I heard the first time I had my real, for sure, close encounter with the Sasquatch, like the first time I knew they were absolutely 100% there and real. A couple of them bluff charged me. The big, huge one got behind me, and I was turning around real slow and got my little disposable. It was 20 years ago last month, actually.
Oh.
It was my 20th anniversary of my sighting.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And when I turned around, my sighting, my sighting too, but this was 5 days before my first sighting, same general area. I was going to turn around and take his picture. And I was wound the camera up, and I pressed a little button to make the flash come on. Remember those cardboard cameras you drop off like a Payless or something? They'd come back and they'd develop it for you. You'd have a roll of film, and it was just a disposable cardboard camera. It was one of those.
Right. And
it was a 35 millimeter, whatever. And it takes decent pictures up close. It had about a 15-foot range at night, 12-foot range at night. This thing was like 5 feet, 3 feet behind me. I mean, it was right behind me. And it started growling. And the lower the growl got, the more I felt this intense, like, wave coming out of it, which I interpreted as infrasound, because, I mean, what people call being zapped or whatever. And then I said, all right, Buzz. I was talking to myself, in my head going, all right, turn around right now and just turn around, snap it. It might kick you, it might smack you, but just hold on to that camera and curl up in a ball and just ride it out. He's not going to kill you. He might just smack you around, hopefully. So as soon as I turn my shoulders a little bit to take, I got this loud voice in my head just goes, if you take my picture, I'm going to kill you and no one's ever going to find your body. In like a very hostile, violent tone.
Whoa. Holy shit.
Yeah, and then I had another one when I was at Tom Powell's house. Actually, you know who Tom Powell is? He wrote those Locals and Shady Neighbors.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Me and Cliff were sleeping in his backyard. This is, I don't know, 2007 or something like that. And we were sleeping in his backyard, and he hasn't come in his backyard. It's a tiny strip of woods that comes from the river for a few hundred yards. It's only like 50-foot wide strip of trees, and it goes up to a cliff. It goes up to a county road above that, about 30 feet up, 40 feet up. So it's just a strip of woods, and I started hearing branches breaking, because we went down. I did all these aggressive calls down. We did a big 5-mile, 4-mile hike loop around the river there, and came back at 2, 3 in the morning. We all went to bed. Cliff passed out, and I was laying there, and all of a sudden I hear a snap. And it was weird too, because I've heard, I always kind of tripped on this, and I heard other people say the same thing. Was they almost think they can project it, and it could totally. It's most likely my own imagination or my own brain causing this subconsciously. But I got images of them. I've had them it's almost like they're projecting what they look like to me, like introducing themselves, kind of maybe. But all it did was, so I heard a branch break up, 100 yards, something down. Then I heard another one break a couple minutes later. Maybe 75 yards down or something like that. Then the next one, the third one, it was just a loud crack, and it was directly in the tree line about less than 100 feet from us. Yeah, way less than 100 feet, maybe 50 feet straight in front of us in the tree line. And I got this very loud in my head, we're here. And I got this mental image of them.
Whoa. Holy shit.
I sat there and listened. I never heard them move away. I never heard anything else. But on that property, Tom would find them. They'd break branches, they'd snap them, and then bend them like a candy cane hook, and they'd hook them over a branch like way up in the air, like 9 to 12 feet up.
Whoa. They would bend these branches into a hook shape and then hang them on branches, you're saying?
Yeah.
And like this is a sign or a marker or something.
He doesn't know what it means. He doesn't know what it signifies. He just knows when they're around and he hears them, and then he'll find those. He'll hear like a big branch break and some cracking sounds. They'll snap it up and then they'll crack it some more, bend it into a hook shape, and then just hook it onto a branch up above.
Whoa. I hadn't heard about that. Actually, you say you've talked about these publicly before, but I don't think I was aware of any of this. This is fucking amazing.
Then my other one was, and this one to me is probably just my own subconscious feeling guilty, but we were tracking. I got on this family unit for a while. It was a mama, like 14-inch prints, 14 and a half, between 14 and 15. And then there was smaller ones, 9 and 7 inches.
Yeah.
And I was trailing them around. I think I found they're zoned in on their bedding area. They didn't find the beds, but I quit going up in there because one day I just started getting like these crazy headaches, and I felt like I was getting like if you ever read about the medical description of infrasound, its effect, like in a Department of Defense and the Pentagon's run trials on it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It'll say these things kind of the people they tested on report these kind of sensations, this and that. And I was feeling guilty about harassing a mom and her kids, and I got this message I was saying I was saying out loud, hey, I'm here to because I was dropping off tons of food out there, like really good food, like smoked salmon and dried fruits and fresh fruits and blah blah blah. And I was like, hey, I thought I was making but I was feeling like I was being infrasound. Then I said out loud that I was also projecting the thought, I just want to be friends. Here's some gifts. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disturb you. And she was just like, get the F out of here. Like, it was all hostile. It was people talk about like forced friends, and which I'm sure could be possible if they in fact are capable of doing some kind of thought projection. I was always taking an aggressive I'd take aggressive approach there. I never threatened them, but I mean, I'd go, whoa, bang trees and then leave food. They never touched the food. And not that I know of. I mean, there's times I left food there and I had to leave, but like whenever I checked it the next day, if I was there for multiple days in a row, I would check it and they never touched it. And the weird thing was it never got touched by any animals when I'd leave it for them.
That's weird.
Yeah, maybe banana slugs. But so that time, and then the last thing I got like at the end of it was, I was saying like, I'm sorry, like, just, hey, I'll leave you some snacks, or if you guys already, medicines, you have toothache or something, just let me know. And the message I was interpreting in my head was, leave us alone. And then the last thing was, I was like, well, I really want to make friends. And the last thing I got in my mind was, we have a protector. And all of a sudden I got like the image of the one I'd seen a few years earlier. That big first one I saw, the giant one I saw the first time I saw one was about, 15 miles from there, something like that, 10 miles from there. And so I kind of, I don't know, I mean, that it sounds loony. If someone's, just knew all this stuff, it just sounds like, that guy's insane. I admit on that one especially, the most likely thing was just my guilty conscience for harassing this family group, with the young ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just, if I did get an infrasound of that, if it was in fact infrasound, not just me feeling real guilty, like that caused that whole scenario.
Right. But these, I don't even know where to start. This is amazing. I mean, I know you're leaving your mind open to the possibilities, but you tend to think like, oh, it has this physical explanation. Is that kind of your way of thinking?
Well, I mean, I experienced it, and I just say what I experienced and how I interpreted it, but I don't know the actual mechanizations of the brain that, as far as the whole thing, like what was the source?
Right.
Was it internal or was it external?
Right. Or was it physical?
But it felt external. It felt external. Yeah, it felt external. Like, it's funny is because I know, Meldrum, like he's not into that kind of stuff. And I just said, one time I was talking to Jeff, and I said, Dr. Meldrum, I said, Jeff, I mean, you go to church and you pray, like if you have like your kid's sick or something, you pray, right? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, you yell out, like, hey, God, is there a bunch of people yelling in church? And he said, no. And I go, do you think God can hear people when they pray? He said, yeah. I said, well, then that means and can people receive messages from God? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, that means we have the ability in our brain then to thought project and receive thought projection back, if that's what prayer is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent point, and that touches on my own feeling about all of this. We are all part of this body of consciousness. Now, I'm just speaking from my own point of view here, and I'll say, it's an informed point of view. I've spent my life, delving into these topics. So we're all part of this infinite body of consciousness. God, we are the product of God. We were created by God, and as such, we have access to that consciousness, this infinite body of consciousness. And so we absolutely communicate in this completely non-physical way that is, related to the whole consciousness of existence. And as such, we can communicate with one another like that. And the fact that we have these communications with the Sasquatch could indicate the type of spiritual being that they are. Or, I mean, it also relates in the fact that all life is an emanation of God and is part of this consciousness that is the infinite body of God. So, I mean, it's just a natural thing that we're all capable of doing. And I feel that we are at a point in human civilization where we have forgotten that, whereas the Sasquatch have not forgotten that. And being an intelligent being, an aware being, they're in touch with their true nature, whereas we're not. So something that is completely natural to both of us, both us and the Sasquatch, it's lost on us where it's not lost on them.
Right. Yeah, it's like, if you're just sitting around watching football and NASCAR on the weekends and drinking beers and, that person, their conscious level versus like you take a Tibetan monk that's meditating for 20 years in the Himalayas.
Right.
Like who's going to be more likely to pick up like that kind of, if that communication, nonverbal communication is possible, who's going to pick it up? Exactly.
So
it's like imagine it's like a muscle or any other skill. You have to use it and practice it to use it effectively.
Absolutely. Yes. Very well put. And, like you're saying, you're using the example of, watching TV and drinking beer and stuff. So we live in a culture where we kind of distract ourselves with our own comforts and our own interests, etc. And so this can have the effect of removing us from our own nature and our own awareness of our nature and ourselves. So I think these are reasons why we've kind of forgotten that part of ourselves. And I think you put that very, very well just now.
Oh, thanks. I feel like I'm just stumbling around verbally and never get my point across.
No, you got it across perfectly. So since you know everybody in the community, I think you must know Kathy Blunt. Do you know her?
Oh, is she out of Washington?
She was in Washington. Now she's on the coast in Oregon.
Yeah, God, I'm trying. Oh, Kathy Blunt. I know. I can't put a face to the name.
Kathy Blunt. She wrote a book called "My Journey into Myth and Mystery: The Search for Sasquatch." Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. I have a copy of that somewhere. I don't think I read it. I might have just skimmed it. I don't think I read it. I know I didn't read it.
She's an interesting lady. Actually, as she writes her name on the book. It's KJ Blunt, and it's Blount.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I went camping with her recently, and she mentioned experiences very much like what you talked about. Just like she was in a place where she just wanted to be. She was just hanging out, and then all of a sudden she received those very strong messages in her mind, just like what you're talking about. And it's an experience that is reported so much, and people have such a strong sense about what is happening when it's happening that, I mean, it's something. There's something happening there. And she was explaining all this stuff to me, and it's very much like what you're talking about. And actually, when we were camping, we both heard a female voice. Now, I want to go over my recent experience with you, and hear what you think about it. So this guy Kip, who was on my show a few weeks ago, the title of that show was Summer of Squatch, Kip Part 1. So Kip, last summer, he was bugging out in this place in Southern Oregon. He was trying to escape the pandemic. So he took his RV up to this really remote spot in Southern Oregon, and he was there for like 6 months. And he had these ongoing experiences, and he actually painted a rock that looked kind of like a Sasquatch head, so he painted it to look like a Sasquatch head, and he put it outside his RV. And then after he did this, like these experiences he was having escalated. So Kip, just a couple weeks ago, he took us up there, Kathy and I, and so we were all the three of us were camping at this spot, and like the three of us were sitting around the first night, talking and listening to music and stuff. And then Kathy went into her tent, and Kip and I were still out listening to music, and then I heard a female voice. Like I could hear, it just sounded like a human female, but I couldn't make out the words. So I said to Kip, "Did Kathy just say something?" He didn't know. So the next morning, I talked to Kathy, and she said that she heard me say that, and no, she had not said anything, but she had heard the same voice, and she said that it was coming from the top of the ridge, right behind our tents, just on the other side of the fire road. Like there's this steep cliff that's got a lot of tree cover, and then the top of the cliff is right at the edge of the fire road. And she said that's where this female voice had come from. There was that the first night. There were a bunch of little communications. Like, it's funny that you mentioned a mom and her young, because that's the impression that I got of what was going on in this place. I think there was one mother and her young. Now, of course, I mean, there are probably others in the area, no doubt, but I think those were the main two that were like right in this immediate vicinity. Like there was this fallen tree that I had been using as a toilet that was like above the edge of this same cliff, just farther down the fire road. Across the fire road from that was this cliff going upward that I had explored for footprints, because it looked like there were some tracks there. And so the next day, this stick appears at the edge of this fire road, pointing from this downed tree that I had been using as a toilet and pointing toward the cliff that I had explored for footprints. And then there was a second communication with sticks where Kip and I had walked, we had gone to the other side of the mountain, and we had walked down this old overgrown logging road. And we went down this road, and we were just down there for like 15 to 20 minutes, just checking it out. And then we came back up the fire road, and these two very large sticks or branches had been placed in this perfect X formation right on the right on this old logging road, clearly intended for us to see. And we found all sorts of sign, shortly thereafter. We found a lot of very small sign, like a lot of indistinct stuff, but it was all very small. But then it rained, and on that same fire road where, this toilet situation had gone on, after the rain, I found this perfect print that was, probably around 14, 15 inches. And you could see where she had stepped with her foot onto the fire road, and her wet foot made contact with the wet pine needles. The pine needles stuck to her foot, and as she stepped away, she carried away the pine needles, leaving a perfect negative impression of her footprint. And I feel that she was doing this on purpose. I feel that these were definite intentional communications. So whereas in your situation there was that hostility, I feel like in this situation she was kind of feeling us out. I feel like she wanted communication. So like there's that contrast there where there's a total contrast in behavior. And I feel a contrast in intention as well. Like, obviously sometimes they're going to tell you to piss off, but then other times I feel like they want to feel you out to see if you're worth communicating with. And I think that's what she was doing on this particular occasion. Now, Kip had been there last summer, so she obviously would remember him. But, there were two strangers there, so I think she was kind of feeling us out, because she wanted communication. But, we couldn't spend 6 months up there like he did last summer, so we were only there 5 days, so we could only accomplish so much in this period of time. But, it's like there's this whole thing in there that we're touching upon with those communications, the telepathic communication, the limbs, the varying intentions. It just all feels very related, like it's pointing to one central thing that we need to explore. And I'm kind of rambling about the whole thing, but like it's like this whole complicated, complex thing, and we need to look at that aspect of the phenomenon. Is any of this making sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why it's kind of crucial for having a resident, someone that lives there, where there's actually like some year-round or at least seasonal living situation where they're there all the time.
Yes.
Like to get that communication going. Like to be productive, I think productive research-wise. I mean, I know plenty of people that can go out in the woods and they can camp at certain spots and they'll come around, but it's never the same as the people that have them coming in their yard all, for year after year, that sort of thing.
I'm sure you must be familiar with Janice Carter, right?
Yeah. I mean, that one, there's so much wacky stuff mixed in with, totally believable stuff. It's hard to know what's going on there. I mean, because Matt Pruitt, who's a good buddy of mine, he's the producer of our podcast. He went with her, out, and she goes, "Come on, I'm going to take you to where these people." And she went out and did her little thing. It wasn't at the farm; it was a little ways from there. And they came, like they showed up, and like Pruitt was just astounded.
Holy shit! I knew that she had done that with somebody, but like this is firsthand stuff, or well, at least secondhand stuff. Like your producer was there. That's cool. Yeah,
that was a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, she definitely had it there. But then it's kind of like, if you're seeing these things, interacting with these things that everyone's telling you doesn't exist, but you see them and you interact with them, and it seems like that could make you kind of wacky to just that thought, like the king wears no clothes, like everyone's talking about the king's great clothes, and you're sitting there seeing this naked guy, so you're wondering, like, it's got to mess with your sense of perception and reality. So I don't know. I mean, some of that stuff just seems so crazy coming out of there.
But so are you saying that it's just so crazy? It's, like it's true, but it just seems so crazy to people that it's kind of hard to bridge that gap in understanding? Or are you saying that it's so crazy, like you don't know if it's true or not? Which one of those are you saying?
I'm saying I don't know what to. I know some of it's real, but then this alternate, because she was basically living in an alternate reality, but it was reality at certain levels. I think like there was Bigfoots there, and they've been there on the same farm for generations. We know they do that same thing. Like if there's no reason to leave, they're not going to leave if it's not like condos going up and all that. So I think a lot of these cases, the person is a little bit like I don't want to say nutty, but just they live in such an alternate reality from the rest of the world, except for people like us who can accept what they're saying on certain levels. But yeah, some of the stuff they said just sounds outlandish. But then it could all be. She could be telling the truth, or not that she's lying, but she might be interpreting everything correctly. And it's just I'm not hip enough to Sasquatch to understand that it's all real. You know what I mean? Like it's just so tough to say with people like that. I mean, then like Igor Borstev's whole thing, like having the Bigfoot call him at that conference and the guy translating, like that stuff to me, that stuff's just way too out there.
Well, the translating stuff, yeah, I actually don't know specifically what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about with Igor, but I don't know specifically the translating part that you're talking about. But as far as Janice Carter goes, like she was so consistent and it was like off the top of her head. It wasn't even like stuff she had to put thought into, and it was all completely consistent. And so much of it just rang completely true anyway, like in the context of, what we do know about them and all this stuff. I feel like she was totally, telling the truth. And I mean, there were some things that I wasn't sure about, like she mentioned a rape and all this, and some of that just seemed, I don't know, some of that kind of, it gave me pause. But as for the broader experience, like, even when she was talking about this Sasquatch, this female Sasquatch, begging her to let this Sasquatch kill this goat, or this, I think it was a goat. And so this Sasquatch was just pointing at this goat, over and over again, like pleading with her, please let me kill this goat. And then, Janice just wouldn't let her do it. She was like telling this female Sasquatch, no, you can't kill the goat. And she's just kind of begging like a child. And then, and then finally in exasperation, this adult female Sasquatch named Sheba falls onto her back, on the ground, just like a kid would do, or like you might see a primate do. And then she like did this thing where she sprang up and then she went down on all fours, like her feet and her knuckles. And then on all fours, she jumped into the air, like in this sign of frustration, jumping up and down in a quadrupedal manner. It rang so true. Like I have this perfect image in my mind of this happening, and I could see, I could see an ape doing this. I could see a Sasquatch, which is, somewhere in that ape human area. I could see this happening, and she didn't even have to put thought into this. Like it rang so true to me that I just have no problem believing that these things that she's describing actually happen. That's kind of what we're talking about here, like the need to have this ongoing, years-long interaction with them. Like the more time you can spend at a place, the better your success is going to be. And that's why, it's ideal to be able to habituate with them on a home or a homestead. And that's my ultimate goal, and I'm sure that's yours as well.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. So like, okay, I want to switch gears here for a minute. You and I kind of have this little miniature debate going about whether Sasquatches have a mating season or not. And I'll explain where this comes from, like the origins of this particular debate. There is a Karuk elder in my area who goes up to a certain area, a certain mountainous region every month on the full moon to record Sasquatch mating calls. I know that you're familiar with this because I came across this information through you, so you know very well what I'm talking about. And I looked at this area, I looked at the natural features of this area, and I have figured out, I think, why he has success in this area. And given like this area can serve as kind of like a Sasquatch a little observation area. It's kind of like a perfect place, I feel, to go and observe them. And I think, like, I know why he's had success there, and I think his success there kind of points to Sasquatches not having a mating season. But you believe that they do. And I want to hear kind of your side of that whole thing for a minute. I want to hear like all your thoughts on why you believe that the Sasquatch have a mating season.
Well, just because of the weather, like I mean, they could breed year around here, like or Florida or something like that. It wouldn't be an issue, probably. You know, or there's a lot of places that, like real temperate where it wouldn't be an issue, but just the act, like the vocalizations, how they just really ramp up. The aggressive, they get more aggressive. I mean, it just kind of seems like they have a mating season.
Well, sure, but the same things happen with humans, though. Like, I didn't mean to cut you off, but as long as I'm talking,
I didn't.
Oh, okay. So I mean, humans don't have a mating season, but the same thing happens. I mean, we tend to be more physically and sexually active during warm weather, you know. So,
Right.
so I mean, that in itself wouldn't necessarily say that they have a mating season. I think they're definitely smart enough to know when is a good time to mate, so that they're, like their kids aren't born at a time when they have no resources available to them, etc. So I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to think that they would have a mating season because of that, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily say that they do.
Right. No, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they might not.
Right. And actually, that's another thing that Janice Carter was saying. She was saying that they have like a 6-month or a 6-week menstruation cycle. Like they menstruate every month and a half or something like that. Like it's similar to ours, but it's different. It's a little bit different. Like the timetable is different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think they had them on the property and that they interacted with them a lot. But so that stuff, it's like how much you really know, I mean, smell it.
Well, what she was saying was that that the hair on their legs would be stained with blood. It'd be
that's right. That's right.
Right. It'd be all crusty. And then, yeah, she was saying that there would be like quite a pungent smell, like super, well, just the kind of smell you would expect, but just like 10 times, 80 times more than that. Like, yeah,
Right.
definitely a smell going along with that. So
Yeah, I read that book 20 years ago, and then I loaned it out to somebody. I loaned out so many books too that I never got back. That one's probably like $500-$400 now.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so. That's a valuable book because it's got a lot of valuable insights in it.
Yeah, I gotta get a copy. I've been looking for a copy of that for a long time. I haven't seen one pop up for years.
Yeah, that's what I hear. They're like really hard to get a hold of. The one that I mean, I didn't even read the book. I kind of read it, but it was on YouTube. It was like a series of YouTube videos. So, I mean,
Okay.
Yeah. You just look up 50 Years with Bigfoot, the Tennessee Chronicles, I believe. 50 Years with Bigfoot, just look that up on YouTube and you can find the whole book right there in video form.
Yeah, unfortunately, like when I really got into like the Sasquatch scene, like with other people, like connected to the internet and all that, they all just poo-pooed her so hard, and it kind of warped my perception a little bit, because I thought a lot of it sounded totally believable to me too. You talked about the react, like how it acted like a kid kind of, and but then the other part of me saying like wild primates, they or just in general primates, they wouldn't succumb to like human trying to like tell them what to do. You know what I mean? Like the bigger, if you're bigger and stronger, then you're in charge. If we're going to compare them to chimps, gorillas, orangutans, it's like the bigger, powerful one. That's like they don't have a sense of like a human sensibility about them, something like that. Like, well, she's the one cooking the food, so I'm gonna listen to her or whatever. Like they just kind of like, if there's food to take, they'll take it. I don't know. She makes them sound like more polite, I think, than I would imagine them to be, but she could be telling the truth, and she's right on, and she's not having any hallucinations or, weird. I mean, I guess it'd have to be a hallucination or just, convincing herself, like, imagining this stuff, and then she tells a story like it's, she might not be lying, because to her it really happened, but it might, who knows if it did. But I think a lot of it did. I think most of it did happen.
Yeah, and as far as like the politeness goes, it was she explained some things that were quite the opposite. Like they continued, like first of all, this relationship centered on the fact that they were feeding these Sasquatches, this family of Sasquatches, and they would feed them every night for years and years and years. And if they didn't feed them, like, they'd throw a fit, and they would go into their basement and smash everything, and like, they would tear up all kinds of stuff, and their family was actually afraid of what these Sasquatches would do if they didn't feed them. So, like, there was all kinds of stuff going on, and it totally rang true to me.
Yeah, that native woman I told you about in Washington that knows all about the Sasquatches, when they went to town, like, their big treat was McDonald's, and if they came back and didn't put out a couple Big Macs for the Sasquatch, they would come up and bang the hell out of the house and break lights and smash stuff and, raise a ruckus.
There you
and
go.
So if they went to, and this family, they had a 4-bedroom house. There's 3 generations living there. Everyone lived in the living room. All the beds were in the living room. All 4 bedrooms were in the back of the house that faced the wood line. No one slept in them. And it was a 2-story house. They said the biggest male could reach up and tap the window in the 2nd-story bedroom window. However high that is, up like 12, 13 feet.
Ooh. That's high. That's high up.
Yeah. And it would say the girl's name like in a real low guttural voice.
No kidding.
Yeah. Like, bring my Big Macs.
Oh, man. So it sounds like this was an older lady, right? And it sounds like she's no longer with us at this point.
She's still around. She's about 80 now, I think. She's right around 80 something.
Oh, okay. Because it sounded like she was a lot older than that. That's good. Wow, I want to talk to her.
She had another great story about her husband's parents when her husband was a little boy back in the 50s or I think it was like 1951, 52. I think she said it was about. Anyways, they came home and they found a baby Bigfoot in their garage, and they were like, "Oh my God!" Like, because they know exactly what it is. So this would have been her mother and father-in-law. The father-in-law closed the garage door, and he went out and did a little saying something and made an offering, and yelled out to the woods like, we're just holding your baby till you get comfortable. They said it was only like the size of literally like a 4 or 5-year-old human, which would mean the thing's probably like just 2 years old as a Sasquatch or something. This kind of points to another thing. They don't keep as close an eye on their young as I think a lot of people think they do, because the young do get separated from, it happens to all, and it happens to every species. The young get separated from those are the ones that go get eaten or whatever. So they kept the Bigfoot and the baby Bigfoot in. They put water and food out there for it in there, and the thing just cried out in the garage. And they couldn't really, they tried to comfort it, but it just didn't want anything to do with them. And finally on this, after about 48 hours, so it happened on a Monday night, Wednesday night, they started hearing, "Whoa!" and, shrieking whistle calls and roars. And the baby started screaming and screaming. And they were like, oh, like the dad was, because he was the Sasquatch family. He went out there and said, "I held your baby here. I was waiting till you came to let it loose, so to make sure it was fine, so like a bear didn't get her, a mountain lion. Here," and they opened the door, and the thing just took off on all 4s and ran off to the parents. And the father came up and gave him a very stern look, like, like, just like, "You're lucky, punk. Like, if there had been anything wrong, gave him the message loud and clear that, without saying anything, that if anyone messes with our young, we'll kill you all."
Wow. And even as you describe that, I can see the body language that would have conveyed this, like just that stern look. I think I know exactly, in a general sense, the body language that was being conveyed, and that sounds terrifying.
You know what else? Her husband was actually the chief of police for the Quinault tribe out there. A really well-respected guy. And while he was chief, he one morning went up way up the Hoh River, way up past the campground to hunt elk. And it was a foggy, misty morning, and it was the sun was coming up, and it was, October. And so it was, mostly, sunny skies, not like summer gloom, but it's that river fog in the night. And it was just as the sun was breaking over the ridge line, the rains hadn't really started yet. So the water was pretty low for the hoe. And there was a huge, long, wide gravel bar, a couple 100 yards long, wide by, a couple miles long. And he's watching this big herd of elk coming down through the mist. He's sitting there, he's got his scope on him. Then he looks and he realizes, it's a herd of about 30 or 35. He realizes they're all Bigfoots of different sizes, and they're all walking down with this huge male in front, this giant, big, powerful male in the front. They were kind of just scattered along. They weren't, usually when I hear about them walking in groups, it's single file. They said this one was looser, just they're kind of walking at their own speed and, looking for food along the way, like turning over rocks and just kind of moseying down the river bar. And he watched this for a while. Then they got, maybe a quarter mile away, and the big one looked at him, just his head snapped up and looked right at him, like through the scope, looked right at him. And he just said, I'm out of here. Because he had a long hike back. And he hiked back. She also told me that his family told her that what her husband told and what her parents told him was that, yes, they all get together. The Bigfoots all get together every spring. And then I've also heard in the fall, in the spring, they get together way back up in the center of the Olympics. They'd meet over that way towards more on the western side, the eastern side of the peninsula. That was the springtime, and they'd get together and have a conclave, and they would talk and see about who didn't come back, who didn't make it through winter, like who didn't make it. There's a big old male that finally died of old age, or probably broken tooth infection or something. But whatever, if there was a new territory opened up, they'd say, okay, you now are old enough to have your own territory. You get, whatever, like the Cedar Creek watershed now is yours, from the ocean up to the fork of whatever, that's your domain. And that's how they kept from fighting each other.
Mm.
And then they get together in the fall on the west side. It's completely clear cut now, and I actually went there and got the loudest power knocks I ever got. And my buddy that was there, him and his brother came back the next weekend and actually spotlighted two big males approaching them in the dark at this spot called Lone Mountain on the west side of the Olympic Peninsula. But after that huge clear cutting operation went through there, I haven't heard of anything on that. Like they clear cut the whole hill. It wasn't a mountain; it was just a little mound hill, a couple 100 feet high. They whacked that whole thing, so that place has been dead. So I don't know if they're still meeting, what that's all about. But yeah, and then you hear about those stories like what was it, Muckaluk Charlie, Muchalak Charlie up in British Columbia talked about when he got kidnapped by the Bigfoots. There was 30 or 40 of them all convened. And a guy I know that knows this trapper really well up in British Columbia. Just this is another crazy story, but he just recently saw a group with multiple large male adults, multiple adult females, and multiple young, all gathered up in the wintertime in a small, real narrow box canyon valley up in British Columbia. So I think they do team up and get together. And it makes sense. That's what the tribes did, and you can get fresh blood, so you're not interbreeding. Like you come together from different areas and make sure you keep the gene pool cool.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we've talked about certain spots where that happens. Like I happen to live right near one of them, like right here at Mount Shasta, where they all kind of get together.
That's what the natives here say, Shasta.
Right. Yeah, they do that. And like this is one of the reasons why I believe that the Bigfoot population must be so much larger than people assume it is. Like people think that there must be only like a few thousand, a bare minimum breeding population. I think it's a lot bigger than that, just because of the way they get together, the vast areas from which they come, combined with the broad range. I mean, they're spotted all over this continent, and they're spotted with regularity all over this continent. I feel that just all the signs point to there being a much larger population of Sasquatches than what people tend to estimate.
That's what I used to think, but the footprint data suggests otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I think there's more than people, like the average person realizes. I think a lot of Bigfoot researchers think there's more than there are. But I mean, if you go up to Washington, the Olympic Peninsula, or you go around Mount Rainier, every major watershed has a family in it.
Right.
So I mean, like Cliff and those guys in Belgium, off their hypothesis or whatever, they think there's just like 300 in Oregon, maybe 350, 400 at the most. In Oregon would be 300, Washington maybe 350, then British Columbia maybe 1,000 or something like that, or if even that many. I think there's there'd have to be at least 2,500 to have a viable gene pool, and then I mean for all the reports around the country. I mean, they're obviously they're all over the place, but we don't know how big a range they're moving. That's what's so great about the Wood Ape Conservancy down the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. So they actually got that tag on what we believe was a Bigfoot, and they kind of got a idea of its rounds, as it traveled around, and it had a pretty big. It could definitely account for sightings in different regions. That people would call different. Would say, hey, I saw one here, and then this guy saw one over there, so that's two different ones, but it was probably the same one. And then here in Northern California, they found tracks. The original Bigfoot track that Jerry Crew cast was found down in High Palm, a few years later, 60 miles south. So they do get around.
Yeah, for sure. They get around. There's no doubt about that. But still, like, even the fact that even aside from the fact that they travel such long distances on foot, I mean, just the fact that they're spotted simultaneously all around the country, and just these behaviors of theirs, like them coming together and dividing up territories. I mean, they have to be far enough apart, like you're talking about right here with them getting together and dividing up territories. They have to be that touches on a thought I've had recently. They have to be far enough apart where no family group exhausts the resources in their area, but they also have to be close enough together where they can, interact and keep the gene pool fresh. So, I mean, if we combine all of this data, it seems to me that it suggests that there's quite a healthy population of them. And when you say the footprint data, are you talking about the relative scarcity of footprints?
Yeah, and then also the repeated individuals.
Right. Yeah, like it's this guy you see in, both of these areas, right? The repeat sightings of one. Yeah. Well, I hear what you're saying. And you're far more experienced than I am. But just my gut feeling says there are just a shitload of them out there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Yeah. I mean, like 10,000 would, that's still a good amount, throughout North America.
Yeah.
That'd still be, it's not, and it is.
Right. It's just kind of right there in that sweet spot.
Yeah, and also just like all the reports I've gotten, like with people like report Bigfoot activity, and it turned out not to be. Like it was just they get all wrapped up. Like they maybe had something happen, and then but they keep the stuff keeps coming and come. Like it's you go there and it's like there it is. It's a coyote or barred owls, or whatever it is, or just things snapping in the brush that they go that's a Bigfoot. I know it. And it's like you don't know it. You just heard some rustling out there, and you tell me there's a Bigfoot out there. Like I know from that. Well, another thing that made me think there was a lesson was when we finally got thermal imagers. So much of the stuff we thought might be Bigfoot sounds at night. When you actually got the therm on it, it wasn't. But I mean, that spot up in Quinault, they would see a group of 13 to 15 juveniles all the time, like every other night for years. Like it was, that's one thing I can take credit for, like, I don't know if I can say, I guess for Bigfoot research, I learned it from this woman up there, was that when the the kids get too big to carry, a lot of times they'll drop them off like in a boarding school, like a place with really rich resources. They'll drop and they'll pack up like, young male lions when they get driven out of the group. Like there'll be like 4, 5, 6 young, post-adolescent male lions roaming around till they get their own territory. Or it seems that the Bigfoots will drop off. They'll be like teenagers, which is why I think you get the crazy stuff like where they sprint in front of cars. Like the ones that run right in front of cars and almost get hit, that people throwing their brakes, are almost always in that 7.5 foot range. And I think it's teenage boys screwing around with each other, like, watch this, watch the hairless ones this time, and run in front of them and see the car skid, and people freak out. They just sit there laughing.
Yeah. It's like a bunch of teenagers hanging out downtown and doing stupid shit, like in front of Taco Bell or something.
and messing with people, dude. Like, I know people that are, a lot of people building construction projects out in virgin woods, where there's no buildings around, and they'll screw with them, like mess with their tools, like hide stuff, move stuff around. I think they love watching us get scared. I think they love watching us be perplexed and puzzled. I think they get it. I mean, chimpanzees do.
Right. And in fact, like I was talking to MK Davis just a few days ago, and he was telling me about the Night Runner video, like of this little, I asked him about it because it's like my favorite video of his. And there's this little Sasquatch is doing this little side shuffle. So I asked him the story behind it, and this little juvenile had evaded these turkey hunters, and like he had pulled one over on him. And so like apparently this little Sasquatch got a kick out of this, and he let out this little laugh as he was running away from the turkey hunters. So yeah, they like creating mischief like that for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing about this spot, like where the teenagers, where they dropped them off, and this went on for generations, but it ended after I started going up there and really kind of interfering with them, I guess, and other with other guys I was there with over the years, they moved. The young ones moved out of that zone. They're not exactly sure they went to, but that same her husband, when he was young, he was out hunting one night, and he saw getting towards evening time, he saw the biggest black bear he ever saw, and all he had was a 30-30, and he put a couple rounds into it, and the thing ran off screaming, and he had to wait till daylight to follow it. And the next day he tracked it, and he took him all day to catch up to it. I guess it was like November, so it was getting dark kind of early, and he finally caught up to it, and he was hearing all this. He was hearing the bear making these. I guess it was like a giant black bear, dude, like 700 pounds, and just a stud. The thing was a stud. He said it was just. It looked like. He said it was the size and strength of a grizzly, and he started hearing started hearing weird noises, and the bear was. He got up to the clearing, and it was in a clearing in a clear cut. And it was in the clear cut, and it was twilight, getting into twilight, and it was it was dark in the shadows, but there was still light if you weren't in the shadows. And he said it was kind of like the ground was moving around this bear. And then he realized it was the pack of juveniles, like the boarding school kids, and there was a pack of Bigfoots, 5 to 6.5, 7 foot tall, like all 14, 15 of them circling this bear, and one would dart in, and they would I've heard this from other people too. They would do like a hammer punch, just come straight down punch, like King Kong, like bam, and they'd hit it, and then they'd split their hand up real quick, stick their fingers into the hide, and rip a chunk of flesh with hair off of it.
No shit. Off it. Whoa.
Yeah, and then he said he watched this for like half hour, 45 minutes, and the bear was, bleeding out. And he said he didn't get as good a shots as he'd hoped to. Maybe he only got one round into it. Maybe he said he fired twice, but the second one might have just grazed it. Only one really round hit it. And he said it was such a big bear. It was just a 30-30. But it still had pretty good energy. And then the head one, the 7-footer, let out a scream or a whistle, or I think it was a scream or it was a scream. And they all rushed in simultaneously and just hammer fisted it, just punched it, just like, and sticking their fingers in like daggers and ripping out chunks of flesh and fur at the same time. And they beat the bear to death in like, they killed it in like a minute.
Holy shit.
And he said he got really scared and he backed out as quietly and slowly as he could. And 15 minutes later, it was pitch dark and he's stumbling around in the dark with hungry pack of Sasquatches around.
Whoa. Damn. That, like, if there's a definition of terror, I would say that's it. Yeah,
for sure.
Oh man, that's intense. Oh man. Okay, Bobo, we're in the last few minutes of the show. Just real quick, I know that in your experience, you come across dogman stuff all the time. Now I don't know what to think of it. I just wanted to ask you, like, have you like come across anything that would tell you, that there's such a thing as a dogman? Like, have you ever laid eyes on a dogman?
No, I've never seen any sign or heard. I don't think I've ever heard one. Or those things blow my mind. Like, I thought it was all BS until a few years ago. Like, I started getting like, well, maybe, and then my manager Lee Kirkland, he's big in the paranormal world. He saw one when he was like, I think he was a teenager in Kentucky, like 25 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. He saw one right 15 feet in front of his car in high beams, walk across the road slowly in front of him. And when I heard that one, that's when I said, all right, this is real. Now, I think the Sasquatch is a biological evolved species.
Right.
Dogman, I think you're talking about straight paranormal.
Yeah, two different realms there. I mean, but then there's that overlap, like everything overlaps.
Right. Well, I was going to say, yeah, because I think Sasquatch walks in both worlds,
Absolutely.
But I think they're more. I think they came from here, whereas dogman, there's no fossil evidence or any indication that there's ever been a large bipedal wolf off branch,
Right. Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, that reminds me, like, I wanted to ask you, you heard about Dragon Man, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, this for the first time in my awareness, they've discovered a hominin that is actually larger than us.
Right.
Yeah, that holds some promise.
I got that article saved. Someone linked it on my public page, the James Bobo Fay Finding Bigfoot Facebook page. A guy put a link on there to a cell.com or something like that. That is the scientific papers on it, because I want to see like what their guesstimates are on size.
Right. Yeah. I'm interested in finding that out. All I know at this point is that the skull itself is huge. Like, it's way bigger than a human.
On the brow ridge.
Yeah. Yeah. There was like
but it's not. It wouldn't be a Sasquatch, because there's no sagittal crest or anything like that. But just the fact that it's there and this recently, that could be what they're seeing up in Europe.
Right. And like you said, it's not a Sasquatch, but it's pointing the way. It's like it's honing in there. It's honing in on that area. So, Bobo, we're at the end of the show, and just like I knew would happen, you've said all kinds of stuff that blew my mind, and you always blow my mind in a good way. I really appreciate it. I know you've got some stuff coming up, like you're gonna be somewhere. What's going on?
Oh, this July 10th, I'll be down with Cliff and I are going down to Lakeland, Florida for the first annual Great Florida Bigfoot Conference down in Lakeland, Florida, July 10th. You can get rooms next door for like $109 at the Hyatt. It's gonna be a good time. They got Stacy Brown Jr. is going to be there, and Robert Robertson, and Sedato, I believe his name is. He's supposed to be like a real knowledgeable guy down in that southeast part of the country. So they got a pretty good lineup, or a good lineup, and it should be a good time. It'll be a lot of fun.
It sounds like it's going to be awesome. I wish I could go.
Yeah, and we're going to Central Florida in July to get away from the heat of the Pacific Northwest. That's something. Who would have thought that you'd be going to Florida for relief in summer from up here.
Yeah, I know. It's a sad state of affairs in the Pacific Northwest where you have to go to like the most humid subtropical place on the planet full of mosquitoes to get away from the heat.
Yeah. Well, cool, Sam. Thanks for having me on, man. It was a good time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I always enjoy talking to you, and you just you said all kinds of cool shit, and I mean there's so much more that I want to ask you about. We're gonna have to do a part 2 of this. Bobo, thank you so much for being on Type 471. Take care, brother.
Okay, have a good one, Sam.
All right, you too. Be sure to listen to Bobo's podcast, Bigfoot and Beyond with Cliff and Bobo. It releases every Sunday night / Monday morning, depending on where in the world you happen to be. Bigfoot and Beyond with Cliff and Bobo is available on all platforms, wherever you prefer to get your podcasts. Likewise, you can find Type 471 wherever you prefer to get your podcasts. Listen on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever else you feel like listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow. You can also find this show across social media: Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Twitter. Just look for Type 471 Podcast. If you've had encounters with the strange and unknown and you want to share your experiences with me, email me at type471podcast@gmail.com. I'm Sam Kitchen. Thanks for listening to Type 471.